Hello everybody and welcome back to the booth once again. I am Captain Ian Carr and today we are looking at a story from the book of Genesis. Yes, Genesis chapter 6 tells the story of the world in, I feel like, a relatively familiar state to the one of our current world. It tells the story of the wickedness that exists in the world during the time of Noah, before the great flood. And it's something that I feel oddly connected to, and not in a great way. You see, before the time of the flood and before the time of Noah, or during the time of Noah here, what we get is a picture of a completely lost and busy and distracted world. Genesis 6 says that when humans began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw that daughters of humans were beautiful, they married them and married any of them they chose. And the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be numbered 120 years. And if you skip down to verse 5, not because I don't want to talk about the Nephilim, I don't have time to talk about the Nephilim this morning, but we'll do that some other day. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that in every inclination of their thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth and was deeply troubled." Now, I don't know if God regrets making humans right now. I have to imagine that's probably not the case. Otherwise, he would not have put his son through what he did. But let's talk about this picture of the world for a minute. You see, there are a lot of people that speculate about what the world was like before the flood, both geologically and geographically, what changed after the flood. And you can have these amazing conversations and these glimpses into our history where we look at the dramatic changes in geology and weather over time and look and kind of maybe even point out where the flood might have existed in that. But that's not what we're talking about today. The world has become full of wickedness. Everything that man desires is wicked. And this is a weird phrase. The fact that when this was happening, when the humans were increasing on the earth, the Bible says that he saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth. And we know that in the fall of man, wickedness enters the world. That in Genesis 3, we see these curses and we see man fall from glory. At that point, wickedness permeates all of creation. So it's interesting to me that 6 chapters later, we have a description of the wickedness being bigger, being greater, being more pervasive. And seemingly what happens is the more and more humans that exist on earth, the more and more ways that we think up, the more ways we use the imagination of the creator that we are built from and the creativity inside of us to create new ways of doing evil things. If any of you are familiar with the film A Knight's Tale, there's a point where they're all talking about how bad this one particular knight's armies are. And they're describing the different things that typically are attributed to this man's armies, the atrocities and the horrors that are attributed to this particular character's armies. And as he walks up upon them talking about this, he says, "Yes, committing the oldest sins in the newest ways." And that's really what's happening. Like, we're seeing this expansion and this creative innovation of sinfulness in our history. And in the midst of all of this busyness and all of this chaos, we have this man, Noah, who seemingly is living a righteous life. And that's an encouraging note, because what I see from this is that God doesn't lose track of Noah. That despite how busy our world is today, that we constantly are connected and updating statuses and pushing posts out and reading news articles and constantly being stimulated just by the media around us, let alone everything else in our life. And we live in a fallen world. God does not lose track of Noah, and he doesn't lose track of us. We may not be far off from the pre-flood days, and it may be a very different world. Either way, we know that in the midst of any chaos, God doesn't lose track of us. We may lose track of him, but he never loses track of us. And as you fast forward, we probably have all heard the story. God says to Noah, build me a boat. Build me an ark and make it float. We learn that Noah was a righteous man as you pick up in verse 9. And so God decides to, in his regret of the creation of mankind, reset. Using this righteous man who has disciplined himself and been steadfast in his ability to choose between right and wrong, despite not having that skill set yet, or the advantage of the Torah in his life, he is considered tzaddik, righteous. And so God instructs Noah to build a boat. I'm going to put an end to all people on earth, God says in Genesis 6:13. I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy them and the earth. So make for yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, coat it with pitch inside and out, and this is how you are to build it. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower and middle and upper decks. These are interesting instructions because we don't get a lot of details, at least at first glance. But we do get some oddly specific things, leaving this gap around the edge of the top of the boat. Make sure you put a door in the side. Make sure there are different decks. It's this high, this long. So there are some significant details here, but when you're thinking about a boat, there are certain things missing, very crucial things missing. That's what I want to focus on this morning. You see, I've said a couple times that God instructed Noah to build a boat. And we see throughout the Bible, there are many times when Jesus is in a boat and his disciples are in a boat and Jonah is on a boat. There are many, many, many scriptures that discuss being on and around boats. But in Genesis, it chooses the phrase, build for me an ark. It's kind of a weird thing when you think about it. Why do we have all these words for boats later, but it's seemingly not here? And I don't necessarily think it's a lack of language development as much as God wanted Noah to build an ark. And there is a difference. Ark is not a kind of boat, it's a box. This, in many ways, is the same as the foundation for the Ark of the Covenant. Build a box. Coat it in gold. Make these decorative parts to it. Make sure you can put these rods through it. Build it this size. It will contain these things. Build a box. And that's what God tells Noah here. Build a box. I remember growing up and listening to children's adaptations of the story of Noah and him going and trying to convince the world around him that there is a flood coming and them laughing at him because either they didn't believe in God or this Noah character was crazy and he lived a hard life for no reason. Come indulge with us or there's no rain coming, like there was never rain before. What are you talking about, you crazy man? Go back and build your giant boat. And pretty much every adaptation of the story of Noah has an element where the character of Noah comes off as insane to the people around him. But he's always building a boat. And you can go to the Ark experience and tour what is supposed to be a great replica, an accurate depiction of the Ark. But I feel like when we make it a boat, we take some of the best faith lessons in this section out of it. See, God tells Noah very specifically, make a boat and fill it with creatures and ride out the storm. Sorry, I said that very wrong. God tells Noah very carefully, make an ark and fill it with creatures and ride out the storm. He doesn't tell Noah to make a boat. There are no sails. There is no rudder. There we go. That came out British. Rudder. And there's no instruction for how to navigate, how to steer, how to take care of himself on the water. But that is the point. God says to Noah, you are going to be my reset point. You have proven yourself righteous and have endured giving in to the depravity around you. And I haven't missed that. despite the fact that what is described here are some of the most sinful things that we could imagine, that the world has grown so much in wickedness, it makes God mourn his own decision. He hasn't missed out Noah. He hasn't lost track of Noah. Noah hasn't slid past his vision. God picks up Noah and says, we are going to change the world. Build a box. And so Noah goes about faithfully building the ark. A very simple box. This box had two jobs: hold the animals and float. Don't worry about where you're going. Don't worry about where you're going to end up. Don't worry about being tossed and thrown around in the storm. That's God's job. And now down come the waters, and the world fills with water as, well, down and up, I guess. The waters explode from beneath the earth and pour down from the heavens. And here comes this box rising above the waves, being controlled by, being protected by, being guided by nature and God alone. If God had instructed Noah to build a boat, much more of his destination and his destiny would have been left in Noah's hands. But Noah has proved himself to be a righteous man in the eyes of God. The coolest part of this story is the fact that Noah didn't have a rudder. He didn't need to steer. He didn't need to know where he's going. He knew that God would get him there. And so he faithfully follows his instructions. Maybe he's being ridiculed by people around him, maybe not. We don't really know that much. But he builds a boat. You see, later we see the story of Abraham, and God says, get up, take your family, and go to the land that I will show you, not to this land. By the way, we've talked about this a lot. Noah has no reason to feel that he could be the father of a great nation. His wife is barren. He's well past childbearing age. It just shouldn't happen. But instead, he gets up and he goes. Noah didn't have a rudder. Abraham didn't have a destination. Joseph didn't have a clue how things were going to work out. And yet, they faithfully follow the instructions of God, not worrying about the future or what may come, but rather focusing on who they are in their relationship with God. If Noah was an incredibly insecure man, he would have had a hard time doing what God had asked, because he'd be constantly worried about, well, where are we going? What's going to happen when the water rises? What is going to come next? And not that there's anything wrong with taking questions and petitions and concerns to God, as long as we accept the answer he gives and move on in him, we'll be fine. So much of our worry and our anxiety are about things that we put into the future, situations that might come up, issues that we may have, challenges we may face, and we dwell and we manifest them in our mind in that moment. And God is saying, look, don't worry about the future. Don't worry about where you're going. Don't worry about getting lost. I've got you. I haven't lost track of you. And so from the story of Noah, what I want us to take from this quick devotional, as we're still in this sort of weird time between our normal programming, God hasn't lost track of us. It doesn't matter how busy the world has become. As we go into Christmas, how busy it's going to be. He doesn't lose track. But more than that, he doesn't always give us all of the plan, all of the information. He simply gives us an opportunity to work out a faith lesson with him and see the results. Think of how effective Abraham becomes in his faith, to the point where when he's presented with a challenge of sacrificing his son, he's got no problem, at least seemingly no problem, because he knows that God will provide for him in the future, that he has a plan, that there's a system here, and that if he simply follows faithfully with God, it will work out in the end. And I know that that is just kind of a silly turn of phrase, but what I'm trying to get at this morning is Noah didn't have a rudder because he didn't need a rudder. His life was in the palm of God's hand. There is no amount of challenge or distraction, evil, or what have you in this world that can get us out of the hands of God. We believe that God is almighty. Almighty means literally the one that has his hand on everything. He's still in control. He still wants us building arcs of faith that are being guided solely by him, not by our own whims. We're not putting up sails or putting rudders in the water to try to steer these giant ships in the other directions. God is going to get us where he needs us to be if we let him. And so this morning, if you are going through a difficult time, if you're maybe not sure what the future has for you, or you're really just uncertain about how broken the world seems around us, God used Noah to change the world. And he can use one person, maybe that's you, to change the world. All we have to be willing to do is to follow his instruction, his will faithfully, and let him take us to the destination that he has for us. Dwell on that in the coming weeks. Perhaps some of you will have a new revelation as to where God's taking you, or others of us will just be following faithfully, bobbing across the oceans until God says, here we go. This is where we stop. Noah's a great example of how following faithfully allows God's provision to not only be worked out and to be available to us, but to be shown to the world around us. Ultimately, we're running this race and we want to show the world the witness of our faith. And so as we move forward, as we go into this busy season, as we spend time apart and until we can come together again properly, be aware of the direction that God is taking you, but don't fight it. Pull your rudders out of the ocean, put down your sails, and let God take you where you need to go.